Imagine stepping into an arena where the stakes are life and limb, yet walking in with nothing but bravado and a laundry list of unfounded claims. Picture a moment when the cheers of the crowd collide with the hollow echoes of a fighter's misplaced confidence. It's a place where the line between triumph and embarrassment is razor thin, and sometimes entirely invisible to the person crossing it. The 10 worst UFC fighters ever isn't about reckless daredevils seeking fame. It's about individuals whose self-assuredness made them oblivious to the harsh reality of combat. From alleged martial artists with no real training to legendary boxers who treated the Octagon like a glorified sparring session, each story unfolds like a cautionary tale. In the paragraphs that follow, we'll peel back the curtain on those who graced the cage without a prayer, whose lofty claims were dismantled in seconds, and whose legacies echo as stark reminders. Confidence without substance can end in the most humiliating fashion. Fred Edish arrived at UFC too convinced that his background in a traditional martial art was enough to conquer the cage. He stood across from Johnny Rhodes, a seasoned kickboxer and boxer who had faced hard-hitting opponents in real ring situations. From the opening bell, it was clear Fred had never endured a full-powered punch. The first right hand he received cracked against his skull so forcefully that he nearly lost sight in one eye. Years later, he would learn from his ophthalmologist that trauma from that bout might have contributed to early macular degeneration in the same spot where Rhodes' punch landed. Bleeding under his left eye, Fred attempted to grapple, but Rhodes, undeterred by any attempt at clinch work, transitioned to legal grounded knees to the head, moves that Fred had never anticipated. After struggling on the mat for a moment, he tapped to a relentless choke, collapse, and blood marking the canvas. Post-fight, Fred faced years of online ridicule, yet his life off-screen told a different story. He had overcome personal tragedy, notably the loss of his son, and even returned to the sport years later to record a comeback win. Still, nothing could rewrite the fact that on that infamous night, his lack of combat experience left him utterly outclassed. Joe Sun's introduction to UFC 4 was theater at its most absurd. He strutted to the Octagon by waving a massive wooden cross, mimicking a gimmick borrowed from friend Kimo Leopoldo, hoping to intimidate or at least distract. Claiming to practice Joe Sun Do, a martial art he named after himself as if that alone conferred legitimacy, he spoke in broken, caveman-like phrases, scarcely able to form a complete sentence. Behind the scenes, those who bothered to look discovered a criminal record so sordid that broadcasters carefully avoided any detail on air. When the cage door closed, Joe, with no real training or ability to defend takedowns, immediately found himself going face first to the mat. Keith Hackney, a seasoned brawler with a competent skill set, effortlessly secured a takedown, and in the clinch, his knee struck Joe so catastrophically that the announcers cringed on live television. A few more brutal blows, and Joe was left slumped, groaning, as the referee called a halt. Whispers of his dark past, violent crimes never fit for family-friendly commentary, hung over him like a storm cloud. In the end, Joe's spectacle of carrying a cross meant nothing against the harsh calculus of real fighting. Andy Anderson was the caricature of a fighter who refused to listen to reason. He boasted an 86-0 record, all via knockout, as if such a neat number could withstand any scrutiny. Adding to the fantasy, he proclaimed a 5th-degree Taekwondo black belt, though no independent evidence existed. Before his ill-fated UFC 3 bout, he owned a restaurant in Texas called the Totally Nude Steakhouse, complete, as the name implied, with scantily clad staff. Ironically, he had even provided ring girls for the UFC, leveraging a business connection to secure his own opportunity in the cage. When he faced John Hess, a legitimate and taller opponent, Andy looked like an oversized child playing dress-up. The bell rang, and any notion of a knockout record evaporated. He never landed a single punch. Instead, Hess's strikes found home almost at will, Anderson's head bouncing on impact like a rubber ball. Within moments, the referee stepped in to protect him, sparing further embarrassment. The aftermath would reveal that Andy's bravado masked a criminal involvement in a methamphetamine ring and money laundering operation. While he maintains his innocence to this day, no court ruling or courtroom defense can obscure the image of him being flattened without so much as a punch in retaliation. Ryan Parker arrived at UFC 7 touting mystical pressure point techniques that he claimed would cripple any opponent with a single touch. He described himself as a third-degree karate master, purveyor of secret breathing art form rituals that made him impossible to choke out. Behind closed doors, he smugly informed combatants like Gerard Gordeau and Remco Pardoel he was equals or even superiors, based purely on fanciful lore. When the cage door latched behind him, those claims evaporated instantly. Pardo, a legitimate black belt in judo and taekwondo, executed a textbook takedown within seconds. As Parker's head hit the canvas, it was as if gravity punctuated the lie of his supposed invincibility. Desperate to land a punch that would paralyze Pardo, Parker swung wildly and missed, leaving him vulnerable to a crisp choke. Pardo locked in the submission and Parker tapped in under 3 minutes, confirming that no amount of pressure point mysticism could substitute real grappling skill. In the aftermath, backstage whispers revealed Gordo laughing about Parker's wild fabrications. Parker walked out humbled, his supposed supernatural abilities dissected and exposed by the cold, hard physics of a genuine MMA contest. Thomas Ramirez's audition at UFC 8 remains a masterclass in how not to present oneself in a violent sport. At age 41 and weighing in at around 410 pounds, he claimed an untouched 200-0 record, a feat as improbable as it sounded. He professed to practice Paka-chan, a martial art so obscure that he asserted Jet Li once trained in it. As Ramirez warmed up in the locker room, teammates of his opponent Don Fry exchanged glances at the absurdity of it all, a 410-pound novelty with no discernible technique. When the referee raised their hands, Fry exploded first, landing a thunderous right that sent Ramirez crashing to the canvas before he could take a single step forward. Ramirez tried to scramble, but his bulk worked against him. He flailed in a sea of limbs, utterly unprepared for Fry's ferocious ground and pound. 8 seconds in, the bout was mercifully halted. The canvas splattered, leaving Ramirez gasping on his back. Post-fight interviews revealed he was actually a taxi cab driver who spent more time behind a wheel than on the mats. The moment Ramirez came to, he faced a crowd whose stunned silence quickly turned into uproarious laughter at how spectacularly he had misjudged his own readiness for war. Jason Thacker's appearance on the inaugural season of The Ultimate Fighter was part of reality TV's attempt to manufacture a David and Goliath storyline. Hailing from an abandoned truck stop, Jason trained under no coaches, using random equipment he found in junkyards. Producers plucked him from obscurity, hoping his odd background would serve as entertainment fodder. Early episodes showcased him as a target for bullies. His limited vocabulary and lack of formal instruction made him an easy mark for more seasoned trainees. His defining moment came when he was matched against Chris Lieben, a hard-nosed brawler with legitimate MMA credentials. The initial bell barely had time to ring before Lieben landed a knee that sent Thacker sprawling to the canvas. Too inexperienced to mount any defense, Thacker absorbed textbook strikes, each one emphasizing how ill-prepared he was. In just 90 seconds, Lieben had Thacker pinned and landed a decisive series of punches, prompting the referee to step in. On live television, Thacker's dream imploded rapidly as viewers watched his makeshift training dissolve into a cascade of unanswered blows. The spotlight that once promised success turned into a glaring reminder. Reality TV fame cannot substitute for years of disciplined preparation. Sean Gannon burst onto the scene with the aura of an internet phenomenon. He first gained notoriety when footage of him pummeling Kimbo Slice in an underground bout went viral, capturing the imagination of fans who craved gritty, unfiltered brawls. With that win, Sean was catapulted to fame. The UFC brass believed they could leverage his notoriety to attract viewers who might otherwise dismiss MMA as too sanitized. Despite being a police officer with only basic combat training, he was scheduled as the co-main event for UFC 55 to face Brandon Lee Hinkle, a wrestler who had racked up a perfect 8-fight win streak and had faced top talent worldwide. When the event arrived, Gannon's confidence was palpable. He strode into the cage believing he could translate street cred into UFC success. The opening seconds shattered that illusion. Hinkle secured a takedown behind Sean's wavering guard, then drilled him with brutal inside ground and pound. As blood seeped from Gannon's nose and the canvas rocked with Hinkle's strikes, the outcome became inevitable. Gannon's shoulders hit the mat in submission, and the audience exhaled collectively. In the aftermath, Sean's internet fighter label felt hollow, a stark lesson in how local fame and basic, rudimentary skills couldn't stand up to an opponent forged in legitimate competition. When James Toney announced he would step into the Octagon, the combat sports world collectively braced itself for a spectacle. At 42, Toney was a living legend in boxing, an undisputed world champion whose hands had felled hardened competitors for decades, yet he had never stepped onto an MMA mat. After a heated verbal confrontation with UFC President Dana White, Toney demanded to prove that boxing reigned supreme. White, sensing an opportunity, arranged a super fight against Randy Couture, a mythical figure in MMA mythology. 5 years older at 47 but still competing at an elite level, and 2 years removed from walking away as the UFC heavyweight champion. On fight night, Tony's footwork in the cage looked out of place. He swung wide in the clinch, hoping to land a big shot, but Couture shot in for a textbook double-leg takedown with effortless precision. Tony's body hit the mat like a sack of flour, and from there, any chance evaporated. Couture transitioned to full mount in less than 30 seconds, delivering a barrage of ground strikes that forced Tony to tap out. In the locker room, Tony admitted that nothing in boxing could prepare him for the relentlessness of MMA grappling. His bravado gave way to humility, underscoring a timeless truth. Excellence in one discipline doesn't guarantee survival in another, especially when the rules change. Mike Jackson's entry into UFC lore began as a footnote in the CM Punk saga. Positioned as a placeholder, Jackson was selected to face Mickey Gall, an up-and-coming fighter whom the UFC hoped would stand in for Gall's true target, CM Punk. Prior to the bout, Jackson's resume included a handful of regional fights where he displayed little more than a rudimentary understanding of striking. When he stepped into the cage, he moved with the hesitancy of someone out of his depth, arms low, a deer in headlights waiting for the siren. Gall, looking to build momentum before the anticipated showdown, took Jackson down with a clinical single-leg takedown in under 60 seconds. From there, Gall rained hammer fists until the referee waved the fight off. Though Jackson had little time to make an impression, he managed to irritate fans further when his brief stint on the televised card amounted to little more than padding the numbers. Jackson's subsequent matchup against Pete Rodriguez followed a similar script. He was run through with ease, tapping to strikes in the first round. In each appearance, Jackson's genuine lack of technique and conditioning were laid bare, cementing his status as one of the least prepared men to ever don UFC gloves. CM Punk's debut in UFC blended equal parts spectacle and outrage. Here was a former pro wrestler, a cornerstone of mainstream sports entertainment, announcing his intention to conquer the most unforgiving fighting organization on the planet. Fans questioned his motives. Was it bravado, a publicity stunt, or genuine ambition? As fight night approached, footage surfaced of Punk entrenched in a rigorous wrestling-based regimen. Yet there were clear gaps. No significant time spent learning grappling from a legitimate jiu-jitsu mentor, no publicized sparring against seasoned MMA fighters. On the night of UFC 203, he squared off against Mickey Gall, a relative newcomer with only 3 professional MMA fights to his name. Gall's mission was twofold: establish himself as a contender and protect the integrity of the sport by dismantling the untested Punk. Gall moved in with deliberate aggression, shot for a takedown, and spent just over 2 minutes grinding Punk's guard until a rear-naked choke finished the job. The crowd roared, half in celebration and half in astonishment at Punk's inability to stave off a fighter who, despite fewer years of experience, had dedicated his life to MMA. In the cage, Punk's facade crumbled, revealing a fighter whose understanding of the sport was superficial at best. His short stint left an indelible mark on the UFC. Even a megastar from another industry couldn't shortcut the brutal requirements of mixed martial arts.